Oh, wait. Try saying something again.
Hey, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Yes, there it is. Okay.
Cool. I'm just rerouting you through mine as well. One moment.
Yes.
How you doing, man? Nice to finally meet you.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Nice to meet you too. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
You go by Cambo, right?
That's what my friends at where Eden worked with me called me. I'll go by anything,
Okay.
but he calls me Cambo a lot. So I just bring it into the show because I know he's eventually going to call me Cambo on mic.
Okay.
It'll be weird if I've never addressed it. Cambo, Michael, anything really.
Okay.
I'm not fussy. I introduce myself as Michael, but I understand that people call me Cambo.
Yeah, I heard the intro in there and I was like, maybe I heard the accent wrong. Is like, does he go by Campbell or Cambo? That makes sense now.
It's just a shortening of Campbell, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a very Australian thing to do of just shorten absolute everything to a weird nickname. Like Eden's last name is Porter, but a bunch of people call him Porto.
Huh.
Which is just an Australian thing to be like, it's not even that much shorter. It's just a weird nickname.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll also do a backup on my deck as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm recording on my end now.
Cool.
I'm willing to go with whatever your whim is. I'll just go with that.
Yeah.
I'm well versed in editing something to death. It's what we do with our show, man. It's chopped to hell.
I do those zoom outs of the edit and it's just like a million chops in there. And it is quite a lot of just like cutting out like ums, buts, and like
To make yourself sound better.
yeah.
Whenever I'm like, who's that guy? Oh, yeah, this guy. Then you just edit out that bit where you didn't remember.
And you sound incredibly smart.
Yeah.
In actuality, I am notorious for not being able to pronounce words. And I think I've said this in the podcast before. David always announces it. The thing is like David is always there to hear me really try and pronounce anything that's on there. And this dates back to when we did the weird alphabet, because I was doing a bunch of research for that as well. And I just could not pronounce anything. There was like one really embarrassing moment, and this one actually stayed in the episode. We did a live show in Denver, Colorado. And for the live shows, I don't edit anything just because you have the sound of the crowd.
Yeah.
You have the energy of the crowd. And I just don't want to lose that per se. But I had to pronounce, it was a Russian composer. I think it was Prokofiev. I think it was his last name. He did Peter and the Wolf. And I just, for the life of me, I looked up how to pronounce it ahead of time. And once I got onto the stage, I just froze and I just like, I'm in front of a bunch of people, and eventually like someone actually yelled out from the crowd how to pronounce it. And then I had to go on from there. So that's the only time that it's really been prevalent in the recording. But outside of that, like David will notice, he's like, yeah, I hear the episode later on because we record so far in advance that he listens to it. And he's like, oh, right. We did actually talk about it, because he'll forget.
Hide both of our shames in the edit. I'm fine with that.
There's some things that I'll keep in. Like if it is actually funny,
Oh, yeah.
it's worth the laugh to keep in the mistakes.
Comedy trumps all. If you fuck up and it's funny, it stays in.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
But if you fuck up and it's embarrassing, get it out of there.
Yeah. My audience doesn't need to know that. So I want to know, like, how did your podcast get started? Like, how did you meet Eden? How did the idea come about? And then how, like, was it you that like said, we're actually going to go through and actually make this?
Yeah, I used to work with Eden. Well, actually, funnily, I didn't work with Eden. We worked for the same company in like separate arms of the same business, which was in cinema.
Yeah.
I worked there for 10 years. So there's like a 10-year period where I saw everything no matter what, just because it was free.
Yeah.
So Eden and I used to always talk about what was out, and naturally talking about films, I feel like you always arrive at these what if cancelled movie projects.
Yeah.
And we would constantly bring them up to each other as this like thing of fascination. And we searched for so long for something that talked about them in depth. We could find things that went over the basic ideas of a project, or, oh, did you know this person was cast, or whatever.
Yeah.
And every time we would share them with one another, we'd be like, oh, but I want to hear what it was like. I want to know what it was like. And then after like 3 years of being an idiot, we were like, oh, why don't we do that? Like that's, that thing of like, if there's something in the world you want to see and it doesn't exist,
Then you
should make it. Yeah, it took us way too long to realize that. I honestly think it was 3 years of us collecting movies, being like, this one would be great if they did a podcast on this. I don't know who they were, but if this would be great if they did. And we had like a list of them that were like, these should be the episodes that they do. So I have another podcast called Reddit on Reddit. That one comes out every single week. It's been going for ages. There's like almost 300 episodes of that. So I had a pretty good setup of how to podcast and how to make things sound good and whatnot. And then eventually one day, just drunken at a party, I said to Eden, I was like, oh, I just realized that this is the show that we make.
Yeah.
You know, we've wanted to do something for ages. I've got a podcast set up. We've got a list of ideas here. We've never put them all together. That is the basic origin of Cancel Movie Report.
Nice. So on my end, I think we have the same common denominator where David and I, we worked at the same place. In fact, we've worked at 3 of the same places before. It started off, we're not working there anymore, so I can actually say it. We were working at the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum here in Hollywood.
Surrounded by celebs all day.
Yeah, like we were in the middle of Hollywood. The only day, weirdly enough, and I think we can reveal this, is we are recording this on Oscar Sunday. The only day that Madame Tussauds is closed is the Oscars, is because there's no business that can run while the Oscars are happening, because no one wants to see a wax figure when the actual thing is like right across the street. We were working together and we both came from a film background. So both of us went to school for film. He is from Alaska, but I found out that he actually went to the film school that was in my hometown. I didn't go to the same film school as he did. I went to Western Michigan University, who is famous for Terry Crews and kicking out Tim Allen for selling drugs. So I went there for film. I went there, well, I got an English degree by accident. That's a whole nother story. And for the longest time, I was just wanting to just get into filmmaking. Like ultimately, that was my major there. But David and I, we were both working at the same job and we were in the same area. And he would always bring up the subject of not even just like movies that didn't get made, but it was like 2 specific movies that he brought up. It was the Beatles' Lord of the Rings.
Of course.
That was going to be directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
And we would just like fantasize about like who would be what in this movie. And then the other one he brought up was the James Cameron Spider-Man. But in this case, he didn't know the timeline of the casting of it. So we thought that Michael Jackson was going to play Spider-Man. Well, doing the podcast, we were able to debunk so many of those rumors.
Yeah. I think that's half the fun, isn't it?
It is.
Working out what has been internet bullshit.
Yeah.
And what actually has some kind of fact. Because I've heard that Michael Jackson thing as well.
Yeah.
And I've heard his name attached to so many roles with so little evidence for any of them other than he probably said it in public one day. Like, I want to play Spider-Man.
I think part of it was the fact that he was trying to buy so many rights.
Yeah, trying to
under
buy
his
the
estate.
rights, yeah.
Even like the Beatles, where what's the story that he told Paul McCartney that they were at a party? He's like, tomorrow the rights for your music is going to expire. And Paul McCartney's like, oh shit, we should actually like get on that. And the very next day he went to, I think it was like Apple Records, and he's like, all right, cool, we're going to renew our rights. And they're like, some dude already picked it up. And he's like, ooh, and it's like Michael Jackson took it. And he's like, oh. But yeah, back to the way we started. So David, he did a podcast prior to called Thank You Internet. And I thought it was a brilliant idea because they were actually taking on internet content creators, but they were doing it in the time of age where YouTube was very young, to the point where people didn't even know if YouTube was like a viable option for uploading your videos. It was still in that questionable age, but they were getting like these really big content creators of like people from when we were growing up. So like Charlie the Unicorn, they got that guy and a bunch of other guys that they were interviewing. And it blew my mind because I was starting to listen to podcasts and they were just making their own. And I thought to myself, like, you can just do that? It's like if you watch YouTube videos and you're just like, oh, that's just for other people to create. That's what they do. And if someone tells you, you can just like use your phone, shoot a video, edit it a little, put it up there, and you can be just like them. And just like, it just blew my mind that you could actually put it out there. They were looking for a new podcast to put together. And we're trying to do a music podcast. So we're trying to look for a band that we wanted to cover, but had like a vast amount of songs so we wouldn't run out right away. And we figured that we are all fans of Weird Al Yankovic. and we put together the Weird Alphabet, and it's like 250 some episodes. From the bat, I knew that I wanted to add something to the show where I wanted the fans to get more out of it. I wanted them to learn something from it, because I was noticing with Weird Al fans is that they know the song from Weird Al, and oftentimes they don't know that it actually came from a real song.
They understand it's a parody, but they don't actually realize what it's parodying.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is, I think, my experience of that is through Weird Al a little bit. Like, I owned Running with Scissors, and I only knew like 2 of the songs that he was parodying on that.
Yeah.
But the other one is The Simpsons. So much later in my life have I watched a classic film and gone, oh, this is Cape Fear. Yeah, I know this.
Yeah. I've actually been going through The Simpsons as well. And like, I feel the same way or if something has been parodied so many times, like Star Wars, and this is kind of embarrassing being a big film nerd, I didn't watch Star Wars until college. But the thing is like, I felt like I knew Star Wars when I was a kid.
Yeah, it's in the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
You know I Am Your Father, and you know all the basics. I feel that about Harry Potter. I have watched every single Harry Potter movie, and I remember nothing from any of, like, I can't tell you what happens in which film. But I know Harry Potter just through osmosis.
Yes.
Like, I know all the touchstones. I know the Hogwarts Express. I know the castle. Like, I couldn't tell you the plot of any of them. I couldn't tell you beyond the main 3 characters what any of them are really called.
Yeah.
But I know it. Like, I feel confident enough that I know Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. So you understand. So that's what I was dealing with like Weird Al fans, was that they knew that it was a parody of something, but like, it's like if you heard Like a Surgeon and you had no idea that Madonna came out with a song called Like a Virgin. You're just like, I had no idea. So I wanted to provide like the original information for that. And throughout the whole show, it was just me providing my voice. And then it got to the point where I was starting to edit every episode. And then I was noticing that our quality, like, I don't know if you've dealt with those blue snowball microphones before.
Yeah, for like 2 weeks, I reckon it was, until I was like, I can't do it.
They are great for the moment. Like, if you have no money and you just need better quality audio, they're fine. They're great. But if you need to upgrade, like, once you can, definitely do it. So I ended up buying new equipment for the show, and I ended up being like the engineer for it, and I was editing it as well. With me having that film background, I knew how to edit. And what's weird is, I think I've said this on the show, I edit the podcast through Premiere, through a video editor.
Oh, yeah. That blows my mind.
It makes sense.
It's not
to
that
me.
like I've used Premiere. I use Premiere a lot, but as an audio editor, there must be so many compromises you need to make in that.
Yes and no.
It's not even compromises. It's just honestly things are in different places, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
It's got all the same tools as every other editor, but they're in a different place, and that scares me.
Yeah, I know where the hotkeys are.
Yeah.
And because I knew that prior to, like, it just became so much easier for me to go through.
I was one of those guys in film school that had one of those layover keyboard covers with all the Premiere hotkeys on it, thinking I was like hot shit.
Yeah.
They're pretty useless because you memorize them in about a week.
Yeah.
And then you don't need it anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, Premiere is just, it makes sense to me. I know of one other person who uses Premiere to edit podcasts, and I think he has the same or similar background as well. It works for me. But the Weird Al podcast was going to end in 2020, and our plan was to actually do another live show in Denver, and that was planned for April, and then something weird happened in the world.
It's very unfortunate timing.
But we ended up ending the show anyways. We tried to delay it as much as we could, but we ended up just ending the show, and we had so many other ideas in the zeitgeist, because like David has mentioned before, like, we should do a podcast about this. He's been talking about doing a VeggieTales podcast right now. Before we did How Did This Not Get Made, I tried to put together a pilot episode for a podcast called Muppets Make the Movies. The first discussion would be like, you take one movie, who is going to be replaced with what Muppet?
Yep.
Who stays human in the movie? And then we take a scene, and then one of our friends, Michael Hunter, he does the our sister podcast, Come On Fuhuko Pods. He is a brilliant voice actor, and he can pull off countless voices. So I knew that he would be able to do like these Muppet voices, and we would just do a scene as those Muppets. That was the hope, that was the plan, and it just kind of fell through.
That is a really interesting idea for a podcast. What movies had you roughly had an idea to try and Muppetize?
So the first one that we did was Jurassic Park.
Okay, yeah.
And the one person who would stay human, actually, it'd be one or two. We said Jeff Goldblum has to stay human. The other person that would have been human was Richard Attenborough.
Okay, yeah. Talking Muppet dinosaurs as well? I mean, they are essentially Muppets in a way, but...
Yes, they are. I think the dinosaurs would stay the same, but we did say that either the spitter dinosaur or the velociraptor would be replaced by animal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Can I quickly tell you the first thing that came to my mind when you said that?
Sure, yeah.
This would be my pitch for that podcast, is The Matrix, because it's a simple split. I think everything in The Matrix is real people.
Oh my God,
And
yes.
everything in the real world is Muppets.
That's so good. Oh, that'd be so good.
I don't know why that so instantly came to my mind when you pitched it must have been sitting somewhere in the back of my mind for years anyway, this idea. But it just instantly came to me when you pitched that idea. I was like, oh, you do The Matrix in the real world as Muppets.
Yes. That's brilliant. But yeah, David and I, we talked about like movies that didn't get made. But the thing is that we were always just talking about these films that we like hear about. The documentary, it was The Death of Superman Lives, What Happens, the late John Schnepp. And I was so fortunate that during one of the LA Comic Cons, he was screening the movie there. He had a booth there, and we actually got an interview with John. It blew my mind that this movie that never got made had so much power behind it. It had so much, and I know you guys did an episode on Superman Lives. It feels different for some reason.
Yeah. The myth around that movie is pretty huge.
Yeah.
Which, in a way, it makes me feel kind of bad about our show, because I feel like what we do is drag people kicking and screaming back into reality. Especially around, I think Justice League Mortal was our original pilot episode that we covered, which is another one that has huge myth behind it.
Yeah.
People always claim, how could it possibly go wrong? Look at the people who were involved. And we take this approach of utter realism when it comes to like how things might have actually turned out, where I feel like sometimes, for better or worse, we deconstruct some of the myths and point out some of the flaws. And sometimes people don't always want to hear that as well. Superman Lives is less of an example because I think the script's okay. It's not perfect, but it's okay. Both versions. I think it gets progressively worse per version. But Justice League Mortal, unless there was some day one rewrite on that thing that no one's ever seen, that movie was never going to be good.
No, it wasn't going to be good. Even like James Cameron's Spider-Man felt kind of the same way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. What a mess. But I feel like sometimes we are... I don't want us to come off cynical, but sometimes I feel that we do. Being like, oh, you know that thing you thought was going to be good? No.
Yeah, no.
No.
I mean, in a way, we're kind of myth busting.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, we're doing it for science.
Yes. Something that I feel myself doing, I think you're feeling this too, is like you start to sympathize more with the producers.
Yeah.
In a way, where like the people who need to dish out the money, who need to make the decisions, and you have a director, like I'm researching Dune right now, and knowing what Jodorowsky went through and like the crazy decisions, to be a producer, to be like, we can't do that. We really can't.
Yeah, kind of an unpopular opinion, but I do think that an unchained director more often does bad than good.
Yeah.
There are obviously exceptions to the rule, but they're pretty few and far between, where I solemnly believe that restrictions make a filmmaker better.
Yeah.
There are points where it's too much, obviously. People meddle too much. But like, look at Star Wars. You look at those original pictures for Star Wars that were unhinged. You know, Han Solo was green-skinned lizard man and Luke Skywalker was a 60-year-old hermit and whatever. And it wasn't until someone's like, this is unrelatable, that he stripped it back and was told no too many times, that he refined it into something good.
Yeah. I hate when we're kind of glorifying the directors who are extremely precise with their films. Like we look at someone like Stanley Kubrick, who took like, what was it, like over 100 takes of Jack Nicholson and his family just like walking out of the car, not even saying anything, just like walking out of the car. And we're like, for what? Like, what is really the purpose of this? And we somehow like glorify this precision, this like this madness of a director, and like we attribute that to being a genius, not them like being out of control.
Here's a hot take people might not like. I recently read the book Blood, Sweat and Chrome, which is all about the making of Mad Max Fury Road.
Oh, nice.
And there's been reports on that film for a long time about Tom Hardy being a real dick and being real hard to work with.
Yeah.
And reading the book, they do paint him that way, but I felt more sympathy for him because there wasn't a script for that movie. There was a bunch of storyboards for that movie. And George Miller shot it in a way that he shot it through his own edit in his head. So they wouldn't shoot scenes, they would shoot shots.
Okay.
So he'd say, I just need your hand grabbing your steering wheel and turning it. And that's all we need. And it got to the point where he's like, can we please play out the scene? I'm having a really hard time getting into this because you're not shooting a whole scene. You're shooting lines of dialogue at a time. And everyone's like, oh, but no one could understand this vision that George had. He's this genius who had it all in his head. To me, I'm like, yeah, but he's not communicating that.
No.
Clearly, this guy is really struggling because you were not communicating what you're doing and what you want. And I think from the book, George Miller came off as someone that doesn't communicate very well, more than a genius.
Yeah.
Because he knew what he wanted, and obviously he got it because
Yeah.
the film works. But when you hear about these frustrations the actors had, I'm like, I completely get it. Imagine doing single lines at a time, trying to get into any kind of emotional state.
Yeah.
It'd be really hard.
And you have no idea where the end game is. Every day on set is just like, well, we're going to travel like 100 feet today and like figure out what's going to happen within there. So we're going to get the guy who's shooting flames out of his guitar, and we're just going to do that and have some fun with it.
Well, that's the other thing as well, right? Like you look at his more recent track record before that, he had made Happy Feet 2.
Yep.
Babe Pig in the City, like both films that underperformed. You'd look out the window at a guy playing a flaming guitar and people dressed as like they're spray painting silver on their face, and you'd probably be going, what am I doing?
Yeah.
This, I don't know what's going on. So I actually sympathized way more with Tom Hardy after reading that book.
Yeah.
Even though it was trying to get you to paint the picture that George Miller was just too far ahead of everyone, I think it sounded to me like George Miller wasn't communicating everything right.
Yeah, that definitely seems like it.
And that's sometimes the sense I get with these cancelled movie projects as well, is these people have an idea, but they're not communicating them right.
Yeah. I think David and I have figured out, like, when you are pitching a movie, there are some things that, like, don't get communicated very well when you're pitching it to, like, the Darren Aronofsky Batman movie is kind of what we recently got with the Batman.
Yeah, we just finished an episode about that. It's all recorded and in the can.
Yes. I love that idea of Batman Year One, or like the young Batman who's still figuring stuff out. I think that's why I love Batman Begins so much, is because you have a Batman who's constantly making mistakes and having to learn from it.
Yeah.
And that's such a hard thing to pitch, and which is why I'm so shocked that the Batman got as far as it did, because with Aronofsky trying to pitch this idea, he's like, okay, we're going to do Batman. And I'm sure Warner Brothers is like, I mean, that's a big moneymaker. They're like, yes, we're going to have like another badass superhero who's on screen. They're like, oh, but he's going to wear a hockey mask. And they're like, what? What? Nothing makes sense.
Did you read the whole script?
I read excerpts of the script.
There's a moment in the script where Batman's been out crime fighting and got beaten up. Through the script, he can't sleep. And then after he beats up a bunch of criminals, he finds he can sleep again. Like it's this weird like psychological thing because Frank Miller's like a sociopath like that.
Yeah.
It explains it like he's up and he's creating his costume and he's been beaten up and he smiles and his whole front row of teeth are missing. And it's like, what studio is ever going to let like a handsome Bruce Wayne type be beaten up to shit with no front teeth?
Yeah. Yeah.
They're never going to do it.
Yeah, like you have the lower half of the face, like that needs to be perfect.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, Batman's one of the only superheroes that needs great teeth.
Yes, he needs great teeth. He needs to have like a sharp jawline. You look at Robert Pattinson, and I feel like it's almost unreal. Like I was looking at his jawline like under the cowl, and it was just so sharp. Like that thing could cut through cheese.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It is just that sharp.
Yeah, he's got one of the best jawlines in the biz.
Yeah, so like that's what you need to make it. And I look at even someone like George Clooney playing Batman, like he has a great, like he has the perfect symmetrical face as is. You put a cowl on that and like it's still going to look great. Val Kilmer just had the lips. Michael Keaton, he still had like a great face for it.
Yeah. One of the, I say weaker, it's not a weak jawline, but a more pointed jawline was Christian Bale, to the point where I feel like his cowls accentuated his longer face because he didn't have the square. He has like quite a long jawline.
Yeah.
He's like the long face Batman, isn't he? Everything about him is longer.
That's the feature that they're looking for. Is like, so yeah, if you took that out, you took out their teeth.
There's different lines throughout that script about Bruce Wayne looking like absolute shit.
Huh.
And I just feel like they never would have done it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think he spray paints a hockey, like a mouth guard, and he puts it in his mouth as his front teeth in the script. He's got a stitch line running through his skull for part of it because he's got his head cracked open. Like, there's parts of it where it's like, they never would have done this. Wow. They can't have a handsome Bruce Wayne type looking like absolute death.
Yes.
Looking like Ryan Gosling in Only God Forgives. It's a Winding Refn film where it was almost unmarketable because he gets the absolute fuck beat out of him. He's got this big puffy eye that's swollen shut and this. So I'm curious with your film, what's your process of designing an episode? Because I feel like we've got a fucked process, so I'm always interested to know what other people's process is.
So we had our email episode in which we have so many suggestions, and you're probably feeling it too because you guys put out that form, and it's just like this laundry list of things. And what I do is I try to find what is an interesting angle with it. And I think you asked us in our email episode if there was a movie that didn't have enough information to it. And I'm kind of okay if there isn't too much information to it, as long as there was like some effort put forth in actually making the movie. If money was spent actually in pre-production, then I know that there's something behind it rather than clickbait article from Screen Grab that said like, Tim Burton wants to make another Nightmare Before Christmas.
Screen Rant act as a mirage in the desert.
Yes.
Whenever you're doing research. You'll see something, you're like, oh my God, there must be some information about it. And then you click and you realize that they've got less information than you had when you clicked on that article.
And it's just so incredibly frustrating. I think this stems back from when I was doing the Weird Alphabet, where I was like, I love going through who the band was and then the material that came out of it, which was the song. For me, I will go down a deep researching hole of like where something came from. So I'm trying to look for like the backstory that helps kind of connect everything together so that you better understand the decisions that are made throughout the production and then eventually like what falls through. So like when we did Wonder Woman, that was the most extensive research that I went through. It was about from September to December. I spent time just looking at her history in the comic books, how she evolved as a character, how the retcons of the character came about so that when it actually came to the actual production in the film itself, you understand, oh, the reason why she's on Themyscira is because in the books, the George Perez version, like that's where she starts off as, that's the name of the island. And before that, it was Paradise Island. So you understand, you have this context to it. But I will go through and I will do as much research as I can. I always go to the Wikipedia article first, but then I will expand from there. So if it says Pick and Paw, it was in the Superman Lives episodes where he actually threatened a producer with a gun. I remember reading that in one of the Wikipedia articles, and I was like, I can't just stop there.
You need to know more.
Yeah, I have to do a little more digging. So oftentimes, like the Wikipedia is where I'll start, or sometimes I'll look at like video essays that are out there about this movie. And anytime like a question arises of like, I need to know more information about like this specific area, rather than saying like matter of fact, and that helps me double check my sources as well. So if it's coming from multiple angles. So like with Dune right now, I'm going through, actually have it right in front of me, and I think you have the same book.
Yeah.
The greatest sci-fi movies.
David Hughes.
So I'm reading through that because he did a whole thing on Dune. I am going through the Jodorowsky documentary about his take on Dune, and he's kind of an unreliable narrator as well. There's a few other video essays that are out there as well that I'm going through, and then on top of that, going through the Wikipedia article. So I have like 4 or 5 different sources that I will like filter through and try to find a through line to get to the actual production, the downfall, the effects of it. And then I like to lead up where if it's a movie that we eventually see, so like with Superman Lives, eventually came to Superman Returns, what is the through line, and why is it that Kevin Spacey is always a part of this no matter what?
That's something that we're always fascinated with as well, is we always call it film bleed. Something that started in one project and has somehow creeped its way through into all the different iterations. I think one that we talked about in Justice League Mortal is the neck snap. Like such a specific thing that has survived in like drafts and drafts of DC movies until finally making its way into Man of Steel. Where you're like, why that? It must be a producer's note.
Yeah, it has to be.
That someone's like, I need a neck snap in this movie. For like 5 different screenwriters to individually add a neck snap in the climax of their movie is too much a coincidence.
Yeah, like with John Peters being the worst.
Yeah.
I love the through line of John Peters, who is just obsessed with spiders. Wanted to put it in Superman Lives. Couldn't get it. Next movie he does, Wild Wild West. Sure enough, third act of the movie.
Yeah.
Big giant robot spider going after Will Smith. And you're just like, this doesn't make any sense for like the time that it's in, but somehow he got it. So sure.
Yeah, you gotta love that stubbornness of being like, I'm getting a giant spider. Come hell or high water, there will be a giant spider in a John Peters movie.
I love this story. I don't know if I included this in there, but there was Kevin Smith. He talked about it in a interview where he went to talk to John Peters. Oh, it was in the documentary. And then he goes back to the producers over at Warner Brothers. And he's like, cool, I think I have a story put together. And then the producers actually bring up to him. He's like, did John Peters talk about the spider? He's like, yeah, I talked about the spider. And I'm going to put it into the movie. Yeah.
I've worked in my time with enough, not to John Peters level, but enough like very rich CEO business types that are like that. I worked with this guy who owned a film production and cinema company. And when he just got an idea, everyone had to go with it no matter how crazy it was. And I remember it was around when the movie It was releasing. He personally drew a sketch that he wanted as a newspaper ad because he was obsessed with newspaper ads. He's like, old guy, right? He's like, newspapers, that's how people know what's out of the movies. So he hand drew a poster of a clown with a big balloon, and then he wrote his own reviews in the balloon, and then he brought it into our office. Like, we're shit kickers making 1/100th of what he makes a year. And he brings it to us. He's like, I want this in tomorrow's newspaper. And then he just walked out. And then that goes through about 10 people. It goes through a graphic designer. Then they have to get it into the paper that's being printed in like 2 hours. And they have to rush it in and get final approvals for whatever. Just because he had this whim of an idea that some review should be in a It balloon. You know, it's like, and John Peters is that like on steroids.
Yes.
He's like, I want a giant spider, go. And then how many people have to design the concept, rewrite the script, act in the scene, do the visual effects for it. And then he watches it and goes, oh yeah, that's good. That's what I wanted.
I dealt with one producer before. So like before this, I was a PA on a film. This is back when I lived in Michigan. And the production manager had just like, we had given her power and she should not have gotten that. There was one day where she figured out that she was going too far. It was a scene where the main character is walking out onto a frozen lake and it's thin ice and he breaks through the ice and goes underwater. Unfortunately, that winter, it was a very warm winter, and actually shooting on real thin ice is actually dangerous. So we couldn't do it, and the lake was like nearly melted. And just in all seriousness, she turned to the other producers, the director, and just said, why don't we just freeze the lake? And everyone looked at each other, and like, it was weird because she was serious, but then they started laughing it off like it was a joke. And then she realized what she said and then realized, oh, what I just did was absurd. And I'm not going to mention any more advice to this.
And you hear about these stories of like whims. My partner, she worked on The Great Gatsby because that was being filmed here in Australia.
Oh, nice.
And she said she worked in like a production office, but she heard this story of they had this huge atrium style entrance to a house with all these ornate tiles and all this kind of stuff. Baz Luhrmann turned up one day, was like, I don't like this pattern. Can you redo it for shooting tomorrow? And then he walked off. And then, of course, 10 people have to retile an entire
Oh, no.
thing. No direction of what he wanted the new thing to be. He just didn't like this one. It's like how one small thing can just cause so much money to be spent, so many people's time to be used. Because he's like, yeah, I'm not into it.
Yeah.
Maybe just legally, I'll say allegedly that happened.
I forget who the director was, but he was filming this party, and it was like this upper class party, and they were serving caviar. The props person just found the cheapest caviar that's out there because, like if it's out of the tin, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
But the director was just so insistent that people who are rich would know that that is cheap caviar. He shut down production for the rest of the day, had a PA go out, buy $10,000 caviar, bring it back on set, and then they shot the next day just because, it was in the foreground for like maybe half a second. I don't know what power trip he was on in order for him to demand that, but like no one could convince him otherwise.
It's weird, the small fixations. I'm always fascinated with it. What gets stuck in people's mind that they can't get past and needs to be in the film.
Yeah.
Because for better or worse, actually normally for worse, it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. So something I wanted to ask you about is actually your process with making your episodes, because something that we've mentioned on our show, I actually discovered you guys when I was doing my Gladiator episode. That was the first time I heard of you guys because I was trying to, this is just me being lazy. I didn't want to read through the script. And I was like, I'm sure someone somewhere out there has done like a table read of it. And then I heard your show and I was like, holy shit, like you actually put in the work, you put in the production. Like I immediately was a fan to like hear an audio produced version of a movie that I had never seen before. So what is it that you do to actually like bring these scripts to life?
So we have to produce our show twice in a way to get an episode. If there's people that are listening to this that have heard our show before in your feed, this is why our series takes so long. Eden and I split projects that we want to cover. So we take 3 each generally. We do it one at a time production-wise. So, for instance, I just finished doing At the Mountains of Madness, the Guillermo del Toro movie.
Yes.
The process is to read the script. As you're reading the script, you're kind of looking for scenes that will make good scene recreations. And I think we've got better at that as it goes through. If it's too action-heavy and you have to read too much description and whatnot, it's kind of bogs it down. So you want, it normally ends up being like explanatory scenes and whatnot. You kind of pick those scenes, roughly 10-ish. You pick them out and you get them out of the script. You essentially say, these are the ones I'm going to recreate. You then do a full breakdown of the script, which takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Occasionally, like you, if someone's already done it, I will grab it and expand it and credit them because that's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Or for James Cameron's Spider-Man, he had done it. His is just an overview. So that was handy. There's been a couple that have had plot outlines already written that I grab and I expand, and then I'll give them a credit to make sure that. But Mountains of Madness didn't have one. So first I read the script to get a sense of it, and then I'd reread it. I'd read a scene, and I'd sum it up in about a sentence, and I'd read a scene, and I'd sum up in about a sentence. By the time you do that for all 50-odd scenes, you've got about 1,000, 1,500 word outline, which is roughly what we go with.
Okay.
That's one part. And then you have to read the script scenes you're going to recreate. As you do, you mark down every character that appears in them. So you go scene by scene. This has this many characters until you've got a list of the scenes you're going to create and the characters that are in them. And then next to that, just a list of characters in general you need to cast. And then you cast it. For At the Mountains of Madness, that had Tom Cruise cast as the lead in that movie.
All right.
So we had to find a Tom Cruise voice. Luckily we did. We found a guy called Evan Ferrante. He is better known as not Tom Cruise on the internet. You may have seen him in Corridor Digital videos. He was always the double of Tom Cruise.
Yeah, he did the deepfake video. Yes.
So we reached out to him and we had him come in and voice Tom Cruise for us in this episode.
Wow.
Then luckily we exploit our friends and family a lot. And we fill out the rest of the cast with people that are willing to do us a favor and lend their voices and stuff. That's got easier as the seasons have gone on. The more that we have, the less we have to do any voices. It's come a long way since I voiced Maximus in Gladiator 2 to I'm not in At the Mountains of Madness. We do all that, and then you need to create all of those scenes. So one by one, I get all the voice cast files in. I do a couple of passes. So first I just do purely dialogue. I'll just put all the dialogue together, make it work. And then I do what's called an Atmos pass, where depending on the location, I'll find an Atmos track that is that location. I'll add that in. And then I'll go through and listen for any little sound effect beats, and I'll add the sound effects in. And then the last thing I do is I add the score to it all.
Okay.
Which we buy royalty-free packs of music to use in. So that's all licensed music that we've purchased. If anyone wants a hot tip on that, Triune Digital is where we get all of our music from.
Try in digital.
Triune.
Triune.
So Triune. Triune.
Okay. Triune. I'll have to check that out.
They have some really, really great packs. Some that have been really handy are their blockbuster packs, which is music based off popular movies. So there was a pack that was based off the music for The Last Jedi. So we used a lot of that in our Star Wars episode. There was a pack based off John Wick, which is actually what we used in our Green Arrow episode because it's like similar-ish vibe.
Okay.
So if anyone wonders how we do that, we buy it.
Okay.
We don't do it.
That is interesting. I might have to start doing that because I have been going to Kevin MacLeod.
Oh, yeah.
Kevin MacLeod is like
Prolific.
he has thousands of songs that are out there. So I go through his website. I always tell people like it is the musician that everyone has heard but no one knows about.
Yeah, definitely.
He's the Doug Jones of music.
Of stock music. Yeah, if you ever look at a YouTube video that has some kind of ambient music, look down at the bottom of their description and I guarantee they have Kevin MacLeod credited in their YouTube video. So that's one of my little secrets is Triune Digital Music. The other one is Envato is a stock. They actually do like stock photos and stuff like that. But they have a subscription. It's a couple bucks a month. But that's where we get all our sound effects from. Is they've got this really robust sound effects library. So we literally just subscribe for the couple months we're making it, then unsubscribe, and then resubscribe when we're making it and unsubscribe. So we create all of the scenes in that process. Then once they're done, this is when part 2 of the process begins, in which we jump in the studio. I'll have my notes and my scenes ready, loaded up onto a soundboard iPad app. And then I read through it with Eden. He reacts how he's going to react. We create an episode. And then that is also given the same process as each of the scenes. So I cut the episode together. I cut out the ums and the ahs and make it flow nicely. And then I do a pass, which is for sound effects. And then do a pass, which is for music. And then do a pass, which is for atmosphere. And then the last pass I do is called additional voices. And it's every now and then you'll hear a voice drop in to replace a line.
Yeah.
In the recording, I've said the line, but as we're listening back, we're like, oh, we can replace that. That's a line of dialogue we can replace. We go back to the actors, we get them to redo the line. That's the process of making an episode.
Wow.
There's layers to it.
Yeah.
I think it makes for a robust experience.
No, like I love that process. And it's very similar, although not as extensive on my end. Because like I go through all the notes and like that seems to be the bulk of the majority of it because like it's mostly, if not all, information that I'm spewing out there, and I will throw it to David. I'm in charge of like most of the episodes, and then he'll come at me with like a few as well. I always send Star Wars off to David because like that's his forte. Like he is my Star Wars friend, and we all have that guy. It's like, who is your Star Wars friend who like knows like even stuff that's in the books and the novels?
Yeah.
So he's that for me. So he'll come to me with Star Wars anything. So we'll do a pass on that, and a lot of it is like kind of our hot takes on the information that we're getting. And I know David has like any film nerd has like a vast amount of like already known information that's out there. And what's nice for him is that from him coming from a film school, he also learned film history. And something that you're probably seeing this as well is you kind of learn this alternative history that is shaping Hollywood. And you kind of understand how the system works better almost by seeing like what fails, but then what resurrects out of that. Like you mentioned before, the neck snap that stayed in all these DC films. And you're just like, well, why did that stay in there? And all of a sudden we got that. It's a different route through film history. And it's just really interesting to get like that feedback while I'm giving this information. Every once in a while, if there is a script, I will read through a summary of it. So what I'll do is I'll actually read through and then just write down what the synopsis is. Once I read through there, you mentioned the pass-throughs. That's what I'll do is like I'll edit everything down. I'll see where sound effects need to go in there. And for the sound effects, I actually go through YouTube. Every once in a while, I'll make my own sound effects because I did a web series a long time ago. And there were moments where like I needed to make my own sound effects where like I would just look crazy just walking around my apartment and I'm just like recording my footsteps. And that's what I would just put into the episode.
I have an embarrassing layer in ours, in the additional voices layer, which is me making any sound effect that we forgot to get or anything like that. A lot of it is like punch noises. So if someone gets punched, I'm like, oh, we didn't get the actor to do it. I literally sit there for a layer and go, I look insane when I do it.
Yeah.
You know, I just sit in front of a computer with headphones on so no one can hear what I'm doing. And then every 5 minutes go, whoa.
I haven't gone that far, but I will record or re-record kind of like an ADR style where I realize like I mispronounced something. And I will actually go in and try to like match that energy, which no matter what, I can't.
Yeah, we do that a shocking amount as well. There's more of that than you think in our show as well. Of me coming back in later being like, yeah, you know, like trying to have that real up energy. What's your biggest project, you think? How many layers deep was it?
It's whenever we bring on like multiple guests on there. So like Night Skies was a big one because we were getting like 4 different sources on there. And then on top of that, I'm reading the story out loud. So then I have a layer of sound effects, which can take up like 2 or 3 tracks. Yeah. On the very bottom is like the score for it. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 9. Yeah, 9, 10-ish layers right there just for Night Skies. A lot of that is being contributed from like the guests that I have on.
Yeah. Well, whenever you have guests, it always duplicates everything. Yeah. Especially if I'm a real stickler for remote recordings, getting rid of any echo. Occasionally get this slight echo coming through, so you've got to chop and chop and chop. And sometimes I find splitting layers even in that helps. But yeah, 10, that's pretty decent. That would make your computer churn. Yeah.
What's your cleaning up method? I know we chop out the ums, the butts, and all that stuff. But like,
so never underestimate how lazy we are. We are actually lazier than you might think. So I do everything inside Audition. People that are real audiophiles are going to hate this, but there's a preset called Radio Broadcast.
Oh.
And it does all the work for you. It cleans up a lot of buzzes. It boosts your voice. It gives you a little bit of timbre to your voice. I just slap that on and then I slightly adjust the input level in case it starts to, because it does boost everything. If it starts to peak, I'll just put the input level down just a little bit until it's not quite peaking.
Yeah.
That's all I do. We just slap that on. Like we've got an okay setup. We run through a Rodecaster. We have these nice Rode mics. So that also does a bit of heavy lifting.
Yeah.
But we literally slap on the radio announcer preset on Audition and it sounds as it comes out. It's deceptively simple.
All right.
For what I think is honestly a better sound than you'd expect from a spare bedroom, which is where we record. That preset does a lot of heavy lifting.
Yeah. I will have to look into that because my method, again, I'm going through Premiere, but there's like some stuff that's in there. So what I'll do is I will take a full track and I apply, there's a dehummer noise, which takes out like every ambient noise, which is nice. Like I used to have a box. It was like this big Amazon box that had foam on the inside. And it just looked like this big like crate that I was talking into. And I realized, I could just clean that up later on. So I did dehummer, put it through that, got rid of that. And then I use a limiter on there. So I will actually boost the sound. So anything that's quiet, and it like kind of equals everything out. And then anything that peaks, I say like, okay, I just wanted like 1 decibel down so it isn't like screeching at you. And I just apply that. I export that file. And then I go in and just edit the cleaned up file from there. So it's not having to like render like little clips. It's like it's already done.
So you render out several times to clean it?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So everything you just described, that's what the radio preset does. It applies 5 filters at the same time onto your stuff.
Okay.
When you click it, it'll show you what it's done to it. And it is just selecting from the inbuilt menus of cleanup. But essentially, it's just a little node that will do it all at once. Yeah, everything you just described, we just use as a preset.
Yeah.
And then we add a little bit of reverb to our audio recreations to make them sound. My theory is that when you're recording a podcast, like you're quite close to the microphone, but when you're recording a movie, you normally got a boom above them. So it's never quite as clean. So we add a little bit of reverb to our recreations to differentiate from our in-studio audio, but also to try and emulate this idea that the mic wouldn't be as close to
Yeah, that makes sense.
That one I did tweak a little bit. It's a reverb setting, which is based on reverb in a furnished room. And then we've made some tweaks to it, but I have then saved that as a preset in Audition. So whenever we do a scene, I'll just add our own preset, which is the in-room reverb audio thing to it.
Yeah.
Not everyone's audio is equal when they send it to you. But if you add a layer of reverb, the differences between their audio are far harder to pick.
Oh, so with your actors, your voice actors, they're recording it on their end with their own equipment.
Yeah, we don't meet any of our voice actors apart from family and friends.
Okay.
So we send them the script. I send them like pages of direction as well. So every scene I'll have a bunch of notes and anything that I need specifically or anything like that. But everyone sends their stuff in isolated. I put it all together. If there's a line that I'm like, oh, you get interrupted in this line, I'll say to them, I need 1 or 2 words after that because when you're interrupted, you don't immediately stop.
Yeah.
So I'll add little notes like that for them. I mix them all together and I make their voices match so it sounds like they're all in the same room or all in the same session or whatnot. We just did our Year One episode, Batman Year One, and the guy that plays Jim Gordon and the guy that plays Harvey Dent never met, never talked, never did any of that. And it's weird because they've got such good chemistry in the episode, which is just such a bizarre coincidence. And it even got pointed out by our guest being like, man, those guys have really fun chemistry.
Interesting.
Which is weird because they never met each other.
Yeah.
And we even got an email from one of them being like, it's weird. We do have good chemistry. But I recorded this looking at a wall.
Yeah.
You know, which is just props to our voice actors. If anything makes it stand out, it's not us. It's these voice actors that we managed to get to actually come on and help us that I think really sell what we're doing.
Interesting.
Now, we like to give ourselves very small voice roles as like a little something to kind of add in. I like to play Alfred a lot for some reason. I don't know why. I just like the idea of doing Alfred voices. So except for Batman Year One, and there's a reason for that, I played Alfred in every Batman thing that we've done because I just think it's
Yeah, no, he's a lot of fun. He's always witty. He's always,
Hello, Mr. Wayne. Yes, I do the very refined Alfred like that.
I don't know if you've heard HBO's Batman podcast that they put out there.
No, I haven't. The Radio Adventures, right? Is it any good?
It is really good. I believe the first season, I've only heard the first like 2 or 3 episodes because that's what showed up on the RSS feed. But for some reason, they put the whole season on HBO Max, a visual medium.
Which we can't get here, by the way.
That's so weird. Why?
Yeah. So this country is somewhat plagued by Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News.
Oh, no.
He's got a company called Foxtel, which signed an agreement about 20 years ago with HBO that they get all of their content first. I don't know what kind of contract it is, but they're still under contract with them. So the only way to get HBO content here is to pay through Murdoch's company, which is so expensive. Which is why Game of Thrones was the most pirated show in the world.
That makes
And
sense.
of all the countries in the world, Australia was the highest pirater of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And it's because the only way to watch it here was to get a premium subscription to Foxtel, which cost about $45 a month.
Jesus.
Just to watch that one show.
That's insane. Ugh, yeah, that makes sense.
So no, we don't have a legal way to listen to that yet,
Yeah.
other than the RSS feed with the first 3.
I'm trying to look up the casting for it because it is a really interesting cast. Okay.
I know in the Harley Quinn show, Diedrich Bader plays Batman. He's got a great Batman voice.
He does. So for Batman in the show, it's Jeffrey Wright, Commissioner Gordon.
Oh, really? Commissioner Gordon?
Yeah.
He's got a nice gravelly voice.
He has such a great voice. They have a bunch of people from like SNL. So like Jason Sudeikis is in it, Fred Armisen, Kenan Thompson, Bobby Moynihan, he plays the Penguin. Seth Meyers is like a news reporter. Rosario Dawson is Catwoman.
Oh, that's good.
Such an interesting cast there. Like even just like Jeffrey Wright as Batman is just like perfect right off the bat.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I get excited whenever we find a project that has a lot of recognizable voices in it because then I know we're going to have a lot of fun matching them.
Yeah.
So Superman Lives is a great example when you know you can get a Nicolas Cage and a Christopher Walken in the same
That was
scene.
amazing. That was
You know that you're going to have a lot of fun solving that riddle. Of all the projects that haven't yet leaked that we wish for is that 5th Schumacher Batman because there's that sequence that people have often talked about, which is it's a hallucination sequence where the Scarecrow, again, Nicolas Cage, makes Batman hallucinate, and they were going to bring back every villain from every movie.
Oh.
Which means we potentially could have replicated Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito and Jim Carrey. Like, it's all these recognizable voices that would be so fun to try and find replicas for
That'd be amazing.
in our episodes.
Yeah.
But script is never leaked.
I think I remember reading about that. I think it was in our episode because they were going to bring back Jack Nicholson.
Yeah.
David and I couldn't figure it out.
They explained it as like the most expensive sequence ever shot or something because of all the people that were going to be in it. And yeah, Jack Nicholson even confirmed it. I think he said something along the lines of, the Joker's back, baby, you know, in that weird Jack Nicholson way that he does.
Yeah, that would have been incredible. Now that makes sense because I remember the weird casting that came out of it was like Madonna was going to do Harley Quinn.
Yeah.
And we're like,
yeah.
I mean,
the rumors like her and Courtney Love, I think, were like the two names that it kept bouncing between. And Nick Cage as Scarecrow, it's fantastic. Like, what good casting. But yeah, every time we find a voice match for someone, I'm always just a little bit excited.
Yeah.
You said that friend of yours, these people that are kind of like vocal freaks that can do multiple voices.
I don't understand it. I don't know how they do it.
Nor do I. Nor do I. For someone that runs a show that relies so heavily on it, I can't do anything.
No.
Other than I think I got away with Maximus because I'm Australian.
Yeah.
And Russell Crowe does a pretty dodgy accent in Gladiator where he just sounds pretty Australian for most of it. I could kind of get away with it, you know?
What's the longest time you spent editing an episode?
Oh, boy. It takes a long time. The Star Wars episodes from last season, they took forever. They took forever to make the scenes. So each scene probably took 5 hours-ish.
Oh, wow.
Actually, it really depends. Some scenes were a lot easier. But a couple of hours per scene. And then once the episode was set, that's our biggest file we've ever done. That was almost 20 layers deep. Each pass took probably about 2 hours. And then you do about 5 or 6 passes. At one point, we had it pretty much locked, and then we wanted to add an additional layer of extra voices again.
Oh, wow.
Which we did end up doing in the end. But that process, once you got everything edited and pretty locked, to move anything moves everything.
Yeah.
So we added about 6 or 7 single lines of dialogue throughout that episode. But that took way longer than it was probably reasonable because I or Eden would have said the line and we're replacing it, but the actors was a millisecond or two longer. So that just pushed everything else out slightly or back slightly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a hassle. That one took hours and hours. I honestly don't know how many hours that actually took, but it took a long time.
Yeah. Before you go, I just want to get 3 things from you because it's the Oscars. We haven't seen anything yet. We'll just do Best Picture. Who do you want to win? Who do you think will win? And then what is a movie that you thought should have been nominated?
Okay. Who do I think will win? Okay, so me and my partner put money on the Oscars as a bit of a way to make it interesting.
Oh.
We haven't told each other who we're voted for. I actually put my money on Coda.
Okay.
Thinking it might do a Green Book and split the vote, and everyone else's second or third option was Coda, and that wins because Power of the Dog seems like the front runner. It's won a bunch of awards, but I do know it's a bit divisive as well. It's a bit of a punt because it's not, the betting odds weren't on Coda. That's my wild card. As far as should be nominated, I know a lot of people have said Spider-Man, No Way Home.
Yes.
I understand it because 1, everyone seemed to love it. 2, it helped cinemas a lot. Someone that used to work in the cinema industry and knows people that still do, man, that movie was like a saving grace. It brought floods of people back in.
Yeah.
And it genuinely was the buzz of the town for like a long time. That being said, I don't think it's the best Spider-Man film. So part of me is like torn because I think that what it represents is really important. And in that way, it should probably be in some way heralded. And then the other part of me is like, yeah, but the Oscars are bullshit. So who cares? Like it made $2 billion. It's got to be okay, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, I tend towards weird little indie films, which is, I guess, the problem with the Oscars. But something like Come On, or Zola, or something like that. I'm always kind of sad when they don't make it because they're just a bit too weird.
Yeah.
What should win? Of the Best Picture nominations this year, they're all pretty decent. So we got Belfast. Belfast was really good. I watched Belfast straight after I watched Death on the Nile.
I did something similar too.
I had this interesting thing. I turned to my partner because we just watched Death of the Nile, which is an ugly fucking film. Like it looks really ugly.
Oh, I had so much fun. It was so bad, but I loved it.
And then we were watching Belfast, and it's the sequence towards the beginning. And don't worry, there's no spoilers, but it's this one great tracking circular one shot in which you see things starting to escalate in the street and things getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Really, really inventive.
Yeah.
And I turn to my partner, I'm like, God, you can tell when people give a shit about the movie they're directing. Because like, what a wonderful shot. What a great way to portray that compared to Death on the Nile, which was just so bland. So Belfast was good, if a tad too long. Coda, I liked more than I expected to. It's sappy, it's saccharine, it's whatever, but it genuinely made me feel good.
Yes, I agree with
And
that.
I do appreciate that. Apple TV's become a weird home of like wholesome entertainment. Don't Look Up, I thought was pretty average. I feel like Adam McKay's been chasing The Big Short ever since he made The Big Short.
Yeah. I have my issues with Don't Look Up, especially the one where, like, why is one country in charge of, like, saving the world?
Yeah, I know, right?
Like, do we have that big of an ego here in the US to be like, yeah, no one else can solve this problem but us, and we have our own issues? So, no.
I can tell you from an outsider perspective, any World War II film made by America is really interesting.
Yeah. I bet.
Because you would assume America won World War II.
It does seem that way. I remember watching Pearl Harbor, and
Oh, yeah.
I was so young and naive, and I was just like, wow, we really dominated after getting attacked. And I had to rewire so many things after seeing that movie to be like, oh, we may have messed up a little there.
Not to throw shade on your wonderful country too much, but if it was a baton race, you guys were the last baton to be grabbed and go past the finish line. And then they were like, we did it. We won the race.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Dune I thought was fantastic. I really did like it. Power of the Dog I thought was overrated. West Side Story better than I expected. And Nightmare Alley also better than I expected. I'd probably give it to probably Dune because I didn't think they could pull it off. And they did.
Yeah. Dune is been like the white whale of Hollywood.
Yeah.
They either can't get it right. They've been trying to make the movie. They've been trying to like get the technology, and just like finding the right story to put it together. And I feel like they finally got to this place where like it's still the first movie. It's just like A New Hope. Like A New Hope's not the greatest Star Wars movie. We know it's Empire. But I feel like Dune right now is in that phase of just like, hey, we have to set up this world. And it's a vast world with so many moving parts to it, where the first movie, even though it drags in some points, it's there to be like, this is what we're dealing with. And then the next movie is going to be like, this is where we're going to ramp things up and it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. In the lockdown of 2020, especially here in Melbourne, we were locked down for almost 4 months.
Ooh.
So I had a lot of time on my hands, and I read Dune for the first time. And I remember thinking, oh, there's some stuff in here I don't know how they're going to represent. One of them was the force fields.
Yeah.
And then after that, I watched the original Dune movie, the David Lynch one.
And it was the blocky.
In which to really blocky stuff. And to get around a lot of the lore that you're explaining, they just have a lady at the start talk to you for about 2 minutes straight about what's going on. And then when I saw the new Dune, one of my big questions like, how are they going to do the force fields? Because they look real dumb. And then when I saw it was just a kind of a sheen overlay that only came up when you were impacted, I was like, yeah, fantastic. That's such a good solution. I never would have thought of it.
Yeah.
And that happened constantly throughout watching that Dune, being like, oh, that's a great way to represent that. Never would have thought of that. If that doesn't win Best Visual Effects, I'm going to burn the Academy down to the ground. Because those visual effects are amazing. Do you ever see the sand screens they created? They didn't shoot it on blue or green screens. They created sand screens.
Oh, the wraparound.
Yeah, and they're all like yellow beige color. Obviously, they can't pull a key off it, so they had to hand rotoscope everybody out of those scenes to add the backgrounds back in. Amazing amount of work, but it really does make it feel like they're there.
Huh. I kind of want to rewatch it now. I am in Dune obsessive mode currently because of Jodorowsky, because of all that. And it's just any information I can find out about Dune, I'm just like eating it all up, because it is just, the project's amazing. The stories behind it are incredible. I really can't wait to put this episode together, because there's so much stuff about there, like Salvador Dali in there demanding $100,000 per hour. I was like, this story is crazy, like in every single part of it, and I love it.
As a tease for our upcoming season, we do have Guillermo del Toro's At the Mountain of Madness ready to go, and we've also done Robert Rodriguez's original version of Predators.
Yes.
For which we managed to get Joe Gaudette back to voice Arnold Schwarzenegger for us,
nice.
which he did in Crusade. So that one turned into a really fun episode with some really fun Arnie-esque action moments. So I look forward to those.
Really quick, my Oscar picks. Power of the Dog, I think, is going to win.
I can't disagree with you there.
Yeah.
I do think it is the hot choice. I've played a bet based purely on trying to win money that Coda paid a lot more, and there is a chance. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If I put $10 on Power of the Dog, I think I won $10.04.
Nice.
Whereas if Coda wins, it's like $20.
Yeah. Who I think should win, I think I'm split between Belfast and Dune. I think Belfast should do it. It's also Kenneth Branagh. This is peak Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
We're not going to get anything better. And it's very personal to him. I think it's his best film.
I think Belfast and Dune both fall into this category of you can tell someone put a lot into this movie.
Yes, yeah.
And it feels like a real achievement in one, personal, and two, scope for the two films. But those ones are the most you like, man, someone put everything into this. And I think they're always the most interesting ones.
Yeah. And then the one that I wish got a nomination was Last Night in Soho.
Oh, yeah.
The Edgar Wright movie. I just thought it was just so inventive and so interesting. And the thing is like movies that swing for the fences. And Edgar Wright does this with every movie that he does. Like, I love it. And I feel like the Academy, this is where I say like they're taking 3 steps back, where anytime there's any innovation that's out there, it seems to be ignored. And what they're choosing is like a lot of safe choices. But every once in a while, they'll like throw something out there that they know is weird, but they know at least it's good. So with like Guillermo del Toro and Shape of Water, like that was the weird movie that they put out there and be like, see, we're doing something. But oftentimes they're not going to go for it. Like I recently watched Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yep.
And that movie, like honestly, is the best movie I've seen this year. I love the Batman, and this movie is leagues above it. It is just so inventive, so creative, swing for the fences.
You're never mad to see more Michelle Yeoh, are you?
Yeah. Oh, she's amazing. And knowing that she was a former, I mean, she's still doing like kung fu moves, like we saw it in Shang-Chi as well.
For anyone that hasn't seen Police Story 3, which is her and Jackie Chan as partners, like police partners, busting a drug ring. Incredible. Like that's peak Michelle Yeoh to me. She does this awesome, similar Shang-Chi split kick where she kicks 2 people at once. Amazing. I mean, I love her. I also will say just quickly, I think Pig should have been nominated for more stuff. Pig was for a movie that everyone thought was going to be a joke when it was announced. Nicolas Cage getting revenge for someone stealing his pig. Man, what a performance and what a movie. I think that should have been nominated for more.
That was a great movie. I agree. And we might be a little inclined to shift towards Nicolas Cage, but that's why I agree. I want to thank you again for being able to share your time to talk about this. Being able to talk about the podcast is nothing that I really get to do as often, at least like the technical part, because no one likes to hear like how I edit out hisses and bumps and whatnot. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, man. It was fun.
Yeah.